There is a force inside you that you've learned to silence, a power so raw, so instinctive, so dangerous that from the moment you were taught to be civilized, you were taught to suppress it. Society demands it, culture requires it, survival in the modern world depends on it. But that force never disappeared. It just went underground. Carl Jung called it the instinctive self, the part of your psyche that connects you to something older than consciousness, something wild and untamed. Friedrich Nietzsche called it the will to power, not power over others, but the fundamental drive towards self-mastery, growth, and the full expression of your vital force. Today, you're going to meet that force face to face, not through logic or analysis, but through something far more primal, through the animal that lives inside you. For thousands of years, humans have recognized themselves in animals. In myths, in totems, in dreams, we've seen the lion's courage, the wolf's loyalty, the owl's wisdom, the serpent's transformation, the deer's grace. These aren't just poetic metaphors. They're archetypal patterns, ancient symbols that speak directly to the unconscious mind. Jung believed that archetypes are inherited patterns of thought and behavior, universal symbols that appear across all cultures because they represent fundamental human experiences. And animals are among the most powerful archetypes because they embody pure, undiluted aspects of being. They don't question their nature. They don't apologize for their instincts. They simply are what they are, completely and unapologetically. Nietzsche understood something similar. He saw in nature, in the animal kingdom, a honesty that civilized humans had lost. Animals don't pretend. They don't perform. They don't deny their will to power. They express it naturally, without guilt or shame. Today, before you, painted in oil on canvas with Renaissance lighting against a dark forest background, are 5 animals: the lion, the wolf, the owl, the serpent, the deer. Each one radiates a different energy. Each one represents a different form of power, and one of them is calling to you right now. Don't think about which animal seems most impressive. Don't choose based on what sounds strongest or most desirable. Instead, let your instinct decide. Let your body respond. Notice which animal makes something stir inside you, even if you don't understand why. Because your unconscious knows. It recognizes the power you've been suppressing, the strength you've been taught to hide, the force that, if unleashed, could transform everything. Your instinct chooses the animal. Your soul will explain why. The test presentation. Look carefully at these 5 creatures, each painted with dramatic shadow and light, each emerging from the darkness of an ancient forest. The lion stands in golden light, mane flowing, eyes fixed forward with absolute certainty. Regale, commanding, unshakable, its presence alone demands respect. The wolf moves through silver moonlight, part of shadow, part of light, loyal, strategic, neither alone nor consumed by the pack. Its eyes hold both wildness and wisdom. The owl perches in twilight, feathers catching the last rays of sun, eyes vast and knowing, silent, observant, seeing what others cannot. It waits with the patience of one who understands timing. The serpent coils near the earth, scales shimmering with iridescent color, shedding old skin to reveal new, transformative, mysterious, neither good nor evil, but pure potential. It represents death and rebirth in one form. The deer stands in a clearing where light breaks through, delicate yet alert, graceful yet powerful, gentle, sensitive, connected to something most people can no longer feel. Its power is in its presence, not its dominance. 5 animals, 5 forms of power, 5 aspects of your instinctive self that civilization has taught you to deny. Jung said, the meeting with one's shadow is the apprenticeship. The meeting with one's self is the masterpiece. Today, you're meeting both. Your shadow, the repressed power you've hidden, and yourself, the instinctive force that defines who you really are beneath all the conditioning. Nietzsche wrote, "You have your way. I have my way. As for the right way, it does not exist. Each animal represents a different way, a different form of power, none superior, none inferior, only different expressions of vital force. So let your eyes move across these 5 creatures. Notice which one pulls at something deep inside, which one feels familiar, even though you've never consciously identified with it, which one makes your breath change, your posture shift, your awareness sharpen. That's the one. That's your animal. That's the power you've been repressing. Choose now, and prepare to discover what you've been hiding from yourself. The lion, the power of sovereignty. If you were drawn to the lion, standing in golden light with absolute presence and unshakable confidence, then you've recognized the power you've been most afraid to claim. Sovereignty, the right to rule your own life without apology or permission. The lion doesn't ask if it's allowed to be powerful. It doesn't question whether it deserves to lead. It simply exists in its full majesty, and the world responds. This is what you've been suppressing. Your natural authority, your right to take up space, your instinct to lead, to decide, to command respect simply by being who you are. Here's what you've been taught: that claiming power is arrogant, that standing out is dangerous, that natural confidence must be tempered, softened, apologized for. So you learn to make yourself smaller, to dim your light, to ask permission for things that should be your birthright. But the lion inside you has never stopped existing. It's been caged, yes, domesticated perhaps, but not destroyed. And every time you shrink yourself, every time you apologize for your strength, every time you let someone else lead when you should be leading, that lion roars in frustration. Jung spoke of the self with a capital S, the archetype of wholeness and authority within each person. The lion represents yourself breaking through the limitations of your conditioned self. It's your soul demanding that you stop playing small and step into your full magnitude. You are not meant to follow. You're not built for it. Even when you try, even when you force yourself to blend in and defer to others, something inside you rebels. You see the mistakes in leadership around you. You know you could do better. You feel the waste of your potential like a physical ache. But here's your shadow, the part you don't want to face. You're afraid of your own power, afraid of what people will say if you stop apologizing for being strong, afraid of the responsibility that comes with leadership, afraid that if you claim your throne, you'll be attacked, resented, alone. So you've developed strategies. You lead from behind. You influence without being seen. You make suggestions instead of commands. You share credit even when the victory was yours alone. These aren't kindness. They're camouflage, protection, ways of expressing your power without fully owning it. Nietzsche understood the lion archetype deeply. He spoke of it in his Transformation of Spirit, the moment when the camel who carries becomes the lion who conquers. The lion says, "I will," where others say, "I should." It creates its own values instead of accepting inherited ones. It takes responsibility for its own existence. Your power isn't about dominating others. That's a corruption of the lion, a wounded masculinity that mistakes control for strength. True lion power is sovereignty over yourself. It's the ability to make decisions without needing consensus, to stand alone when necessary, to bear the weight of leadership without collapsing. People are drawn to this in you, even when you hide it. They sense your natural authority. They ask for your opinion. They look to you in crisis, and you've probably noticed something. When you do step into your power, when you do take command, things work. People feel safer. Chaos becomes order. Problems get solved. But then you pull back. You retreat. You tell yourself you're being too much, too intense, too dominant. And the lion inside you paces the cage, frustrated and restless. What you're avoiding is this. You want to lead. You want to decide. You want to stop negotiating with people who don't have your vision or your capacity. But you're terrified of being seen as tyrannical, as selfish, as power-hungry, so you oscillate between expressing your power and apologizing for it. The lion doesn't apologize. It doesn't explain itself. It simply is. And those who belong in its pride recognize its authority naturally. Those who don't will always resist, no matter how gentle you are. Your challenge isn't to become more lion-like. You already are the lion. Your challenge is to stop pretending you're not, to stop shrinking for people who need you small, to stop apologizing for the magnitude of your presence. What would happen if you led without second-guessing yourself? What would happen if you made decisions based on your judgment alone? What would happen if you accepted that some people will resent your power no matter how kindly you wield it? The lion teaches you this. Your power isn't something you achieve. It's something you stop denying. It's your natural state. And the only thing standing between you and full sovereignty is your fear of what people will think when you stop asking their permission to exist. You chose the lion because you're tired. Tired of dimming yourself. Tired of leading from the shadows. Tired of pretending you're not the most capable person in the room. And somewhere deep inside, you know the truth. Your power isn't the problem. Your fear of it is. The wolf. The power of strategic loyalty. If the wolf captured your attention, moving through silver moonlight between shadow and illumination, then you've recognized a power that terrifies the modern world. The power of chosen loyalty, strategic alliance, and fierce protection of the few over the many. The wolf is misunderstood. People think it's about the pack, about belonging, about togetherness. But that's a sanitized version. The wolf's true power is discrimination. It knows who belongs and who doesn't. It protects its own with savage dedication and shows no mercy to threats. This is what you've been suppressing. Your right to choose who deserves your loyalty, your energy, your protection. You've been taught that you should care about everyone equally, that good people are inclusive, open, welcoming to all, that having boundaries is selfish, that protecting your energy is cold, so you let everyone in. You give to those who take. You maintain relationships that drain you. You perform care for people you don't actually care about. But the wolf inside you knows better. It knows that not everyone deserves access to you. That loyalty must be earned, not demanded. That some people are threats disguised as friends, and every time you betray your instincts to be polite, to be nice, to avoid being called selective, the wolf inside you growls a warning. Jung wrote about the anima and animus, the inner opposite that balances our conscious personality. If you're someone who presents as gentle and accommodating, the wolf is your animus, your inner warrior that says no when you keep saying yes. If you're someone who presents as independent and strong, the wolf is your anima, your need for true connection with the chosen few. You've learned to be alone, not because you prefer it, but because most people aren't worth the vulnerability. You've been betrayed, maybe not dramatically, maybe just in small ways, repeated over time. Promises broken, confidences shared, support withdrawn when you needed it most, and you learned the lesson. Most people are not your pack. Most people are just passing through. So you built walls, high ones. And now you operate from a fortress. You're friendly, but not friends. You're helpful, but not invested. You keep people at a distance where they can't hurt you. And you tell yourself this is wisdom, this is protection, this is strength. But here's your shadow. You're lonely, desperately, achingly lonely. Because the wolf isn't meant to be alone. It's meant to have a pack. A real one. A chosen family that would die for each other. But you've been hurt so many times that you can't trust anyone enough to let them in. Nietzsche spoke of master morality versus slave morality. Slave morality says everyone is equal and deserves equal treatment. Master morality says value must be earned, and hierarchy is natural. The wolf operates on master morality. It recognizes that not all bonds are equal, that protecting your pack means sometimes being ruthless with outsiders. This makes people uncomfortable. In a world that preaches universal love and infinite compassion, the wolf's selective loyalty seems cruel, but it's not cruel. It's honest. You have limited energy, limited time, limited capacity for deep connection, and pretending otherwise doesn't make you virtuous. It makes you scattered, drained, and ineffective. Your power is strategic. You read people quickly. You sense intentions beneath words. You know who's genuine and who's performing. This gift terrifies you because it makes you appear cynical, judgmental, harsh. So you override it. You give people second chances they haven't earned. You ignore red flags to prove you're not paranoid. But every time you ignore your wolf instincts, you get hurt. And every time you get hurt, the walls go higher. The cycle continues, protected but isolated, safe but alone. What you're avoiding is this. You want pack. Deep, loyal, ride-or-die connection with people who've earned their place in your life. But you're terrified of choosing wrong again, of letting someone in who will betray you, of being vulnerable with people who don't deserve your vulnerability. The wolf teaches you something crucial. Loyalty isn't about permanence. It's about presence. Your pack isn't determined by time or history. It's determined by who shows up when it matters. And protecting that pack, being ruthlessly selective about who gets access to your inner circle isn't cold, it's necessary. You've been trying to be everyone's friend because you're afraid of being no one's friend. But the wolf knows that depth requires exclusivity, that real connection requires discrimination, that you can't protect everyone, so you must choose who to protect. Your challenge isn't to open up more. It's to own your selectivity without guilt. To stop apologizing for having standards, to accept that some people will call you cold or closed off, and that's fine. They're not your pack anyway. What would happen if you stopped trying to be accessible to everyone? What would happen if you let your wolf instincts guide who gets close and who stays distant? What would happen if you built your pack intentionally, carefully, strategically, and then defended it fiercely? The wolf in moonlight isn't choosing between light and shadow. It's moving through both. It's accepting that loyalty requires darkness sometimes, that protection requires teeth, that love, real love, includes the capacity for savagery on behalf of those you've chosen. You selected the wolf because you're exhausted from pretending everyone matters equally. You know they don't. You know your energy is precious, and most people waste it. And you're ready to stop feeling guilty about that truth. Your power is selective, strategic, loyal to the few worthy of loyalty. And that's not a weakness. It's your greatest strength. The owl, the power of sacred solitude. If your eyes were drawn to the owl, perched in twilight with vast, knowing eyes and perfect stillness, then you've recognized the power that frightens people most. The power of seeing what others refuse to see, of knowing what makes people uncomfortable, of existing in solitude not from loneliness, but from clarity. The owl represents wisdom, yes, but not the wisdom of books and education, the wisdom of observation, of patience, of understanding that most of what people do and say is performance, and the real truth lives in what they don't say, in the pauses, in the things they avoid. You see too much. You always have. As a child, you probably noticed things adults didn't want you to notice. Tension between parents that everyone pretended wasn't there. Fakeness in people everyone else thought were kind. Lies that everyone accepted as truth. And when you pointed these things out, you learned quickly. Don't. People don't want to see. They want their comfortable illusions. So you learn to keep your observations to yourself, to watch in silence, to know things but not speak them. And over time, this became your power and your prison. You understand people deeply, but that understanding separates you from them. You're always slightly outside, observing, analyzing, seeing patterns they can't see. Jung spoke of the wise old man or wise old woman archetype, the figure in myths and dreams who possesses knowledge others lack. The owl is this archetype embodied. It sits apart, sees clearly, speaks rarely, and when it does speak, people either listen with reverence or dismiss with discomfort. You've been taught that connection requires participation, that to have relationships, you must engage, share, be present in the moment. But your power is in your distance, in your ability to see the whole picture while others are lost in details, in your understanding of patterns while others react to isolated events. This makes you valuable in crisis. When everything is chaos, you're calm. When everyone is panicking, you're clear. Because you see what others don't. You understand what's really happening beneath the surface drama. People come to you for wisdom, for perspective, for the truth they can sense but not articulate. But here's your shadow, the truth you avoid. You use your wisdom as a shield. You stay in observation mode to avoid participation. You analyze others to avoid being analyzed yourself. Your clarity about everyone else protects you from having to be clear about yourself. Nietzsche wrote about the dangers of becoming wise, how knowledge can become a burden that separates you from life. The owl knows this. With every insight gained, you move further from innocence. With every pattern recognized, spontaneity dies. You can't unsee what you see. You can't unknow what you know, and so you live in twilight. Not fully in the world, not fully removed from it, present but distant, helpful but unavailable, wise but lonely. Because wisdom without connection is just sophisticated isolation. Your power is real. You do see things others miss. You do understand dynamics that confuse most people. But you've weaponized this gift. You've turned insight into superiority. You've confused knowing about people with knowing people. And there's a difference. What you're avoiding is this. You want to come down from your perch. You want to be part of things, not just an observer of things. You want to be known, not just to know. But you're terrified that if you descend into participation, you'll lose your clarity. That if you get involved, you'll become as blind as everyone else. The owl teaches you something crucial. Wisdom and participation aren't opposites. Observation and connection aren't mutually exclusive. You can see clearly and still be present. You can understand patterns and still experience moments. You can be wise and still be human. Your challenge isn't to see less. It's to do more with what you see. Not to close your eyes, but to open your heart. Not to stop observing, but to start participating in what you observe. People don't just need your wisdom. They need your presence, not your analysis of their situation, your actual company, not your accurate assessment of their patterns, your willingness to be in the pattern with them, even if you see where it leads. What would happen if you traded some wisdom for some experience? What would happen if you let yourself be foolish occasionally? What would happen if you stopped watching life and started living it, even knowing all you know? The owl in twilight sits at the boundary between day and night, but twilight doesn't last forever. Eventually, you must choose. Full darkness where you see everything but connect with nothing, or step into the light where you see less clearly but feel more deeply. You chose the owl because your wisdom has become exhausting, because knowing everything is a lonely burden. Because somewhere beneath all that seeing and understanding, there's a part of you that just wants to stop watching and start being watched, to stop knowing and start being known. Your power is perception, but perception without participation is just spectatorship. And life isn't meant to be watched from a distance. It's meant to be lived, even if that means occasionally making the same mistakes you've watched others make. The serpent, the power of transformation. If the serpent drew you in, coiling near the earth with iridescent scales and the old skin half shed, then you've recognized the power that society fears most. The power of constant transformation, of death and rebirth, of becoming something new by killing what you were. The serpent has been demonized for thousands of years. Christianity made it evil. Culture made it dangerous. But in older traditions, in myth and archetype, the serpent is sacred. It represents transformation, healing, forbidden knowledge, and the courage to shed what no longer serves. You are not who you were. Not last year, not 5 years ago, maybe not even last month. You've died and been reborn so many times that you barely recognize yourself in old photographs. And this constant transformation, this refusal to be static, makes people deeply uncomfortable. They want you to stay who you were, to be predictable, to maintain the version of yourself they got comfortable with. But you can't. It's not that you won't. You literally can't. Because something in you demands evolution, demands growth, demands the death of old selves to make room for new ones. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are. But for most people, individuation is gradual, gentle, barely noticeable. For you, it's violent, dramatic, complete. You don't evolve. You revolutionize. You don't adjust. You transform entirely. This manifests in your life in visible ways. You've probably changed careers, changed cities, changed entire social circles, not once, multiple times. You've walked away from relationships that others would have tried to save. You've burned bridges that others would have carefully maintained. You've killed versions of yourself that others would have clung to desperately. And people judge you for it. They call you unstable, unreliable, unable to commit. They don't understand that your commitment isn't to any particular form. It's to the process of becoming. Your loyalty isn't to who you are. It's to who you're meant to become. Here's your shadow, the truth you avoid. You're addicted to transformation. You use change as an escape. Every time things get difficult, every time you face the hard work of staying and deepening, you shed your skin and slither away. You call it growth. But sometimes it's just avoidance with a spiritual name. Nietzsche spoke of eternal recurrence, the idea that if you had to live your exact life over and over forever, would you say yes? The serpent's shadow is that it never says yes to anything. It's always moving toward the next thing, the next version, the next transformation. It never stays long enough to actually live anything fully. You've burned so many bridges that sometimes you can't tell if you're moving forward or just running away. You've shed so many skins that sometimes you wonder if there's an actual self beneath all the versions, or if you're just an endless process of becoming with no stable core. The power of the serpent is real. You do grow faster than others. You do evolve while they stagnate. You do have the courage to kill old selves that no longer serve. But courage isn't just moving forward. Sometimes it's staying still. Sometimes transformation means deepening into what you are rather than becoming something new. What you're avoiding is this. You're terrified of permanence, of commitment, of the death that isn't followed by rebirth. You keep transforming because staying still feels like dying. But constant transformation is its own kind of death. Death of depth, death of mastery, death of relationships that require years to develop. The serpent's scales are iridescent because they catch every color. You've been everything, tried everything, become everything. But have you actually been anything long enough for it to matter? Have you mastered anything? Have you committed to anyone? Your gift is adaptability. You can become whatever you need to become. But that gift has made you hollow. Because if you can be anything, are you actually anything? If you're always in the process of transformation, when do you actually arrive? Jung believed that the self emerges through integration of opposites. For you, the opposites are transformation and stability, change and commitment, death and life. And you've been so focused on the death and rebirth cycle that you've forgotten the living part. The serpent sheds its skin to grow, yes, but it doesn't shed its skin every day. It does so when the old skin has become genuinely constrictive, when staying the same would mean death. But you shed your skin preemptively, before it's actually necessary. As soon as anything becomes familiar, you panic and transform. Your challenge isn't to stop transforming, it's to transform with purpose rather than compulsion. To choose consciously when to shed and when to deepen. To recognize that sometimes the transformation required isn't becoming someone new. It's becoming more fully who you already are. What would happen if you stayed? What would happen if, instead of shedding this version of yourself, you inhabited it completely? What would happen if you let something, someone, some place, some purpose matter enough that you'd fight for it rather than slithering away? The serpent teaches you this. Transformation is power, but transformation without integration is just restlessness. Shedding skin is necessary, but if you shed too often, you never develop the thick skin required to face anything difficult. You chose the serpent because you're exhausted from constantly becoming, because you've died and been reborn so many times that you're starting to forget what it feels like to just live. Because somewhere beneath all the transformation, there's a self that wants to be known, not as what it's becoming, but as what it is right now. Your power is metamorphosis. But maybe, just maybe, the next transformation you need is learning to stay. The deer. The power of sensitive strength. If the deer captured your soul standing in a clearing where light breaks through, graceful yet alert, delicate yet powerful, then you've recognized the power that the modern world has tried to erase. The power of gentleness as strength, of sensitivity as capability, of presence as force. The deer is the animal people choose last. Because in a world that values aggression, dominance, and hardness, the deer seems weak, prey, vulnerable, something to be protected rather than something with power. But this misunderstands everything. The deer's power isn't in spite of its gentleness. It's because of it. You feel everything, not in a vague, poetic way, but actually, you walk into rooms and sense the energy. You hear what people don't say. You pick up on micro-expressions, tonal shifts, unspoken tensions. This hypersensitivity isn't a flaw in your system. It's your system. And it gives you access to information that others simply don't have. But you've been taught that this is weakness. That thick skin is better than sensitive skin. That toughness is more valuable than awareness. So you've tried to become less sensitive, less affected, less responsive. You've built armor. You've numbed yourself. You've pretended that things don't hurt when they absolutely do. Jung spoke of the inferior function, the aspect of our psyche we reject because it doesn't fit our persona. For those who value logic, it's feeling. For those who value action, it's intuition. But for you, the rejected function is sensitivity itself. You've been told your whole life that you're too sensitive, as if sensitivity exists on a spectrum, and you've overshot some acceptable middle. But here's what they don't tell you. Your sensitivity is prophetic. You sense danger before it arrives. You feel shifts in relationships before anyone speaks them. You know when something is wrong before evidence appears. This gives you an advantage that hard, insensitive people will never have. You navigate the world through feeling, and in a world built on subtle cues and hidden dynamics, feeling is power. The deer's power is in its alertness. It doesn't wear armor because armor would slow it down. It doesn't attack because it doesn't need to. It survives through awareness, through speed, through the ability to sense and respond before danger becomes imminent. This is your power too. You don't confront directly, you adjust, you adapt. You move through the world with a grace that looks effortless but requires constant awareness. But here's your shadow. You've mistaken gentleness for weakness so many times that you've stopped trusting your own strength. When you need to be firm, you hesitate. When you need to defend yourself, you freeze. When you need to stand your ground, you run. Because somewhere deep inside, you believe that sensitivity and strength are opposites. Nietzsche wrote, "One must have chaos within to give birth to a dancing star." But he also wrote about the dangers of the herd, of becoming so focused on not disturbing others that you lose yourself. The deer's shadow is fawning, accommodating when you should resist, pleasing when you should provoke, disappearing when you should be seen. You've been wounded by people who mistook your gentleness for permission, who took your kindness as an invitation to take more, who saw your sensitivity as a target. And instead of recognizing that their behavior was the problem, you decided your sensitivity was the problem. So you tried to become harder, colder, less affected. But hardness on you is like armor on a deer. It doesn't fit. It slows you down. It disconnects you from the very source of your power, because your power isn't in withstanding. It's in perceiving and responding. Your strength isn't in your thick skin. It's in your thin skin that feels everything and chooses consciously how to respond. What you're avoiding is this. You're ashamed of your sensitivity. You see it as a liability in a world that rewards aggression. You've tried to kill the deer inside you and become the wolf, the lion, something fiercer. But you're not built for that. And pretending to be something you're not doesn't make you stronger. It makes you exhausted. The deer in the clearing isn't hiding. It's not cowering. It's standing in full light, aware and present. Its ears are forward. Its muscles are ready. It's alert to everything. And in that alertness lives its power. It doesn't need to dominate to survive. It needs to perceive and act. Your gift is presence, real presence. Not the performing kind, the kind that feels what's happening in the moment and responds authentically. People feel safe around you not because you're strong in the traditional sense, but because your presence is genuine. You don't perform. You don't manipulate. You're simply here, and that here-ness is healing. But you've been using your sensitivity reactively rather than proactively, feeling everything, then scrambling to manage the overwhelm. What would happen if you trusted your sensitivity enough to act on it before things escalate? To say no when you feel a no? To leave when you sense danger? To stop performing safety and start honoring your actual feelings? The deer doesn't fight the wolf because fighting isn't its power, but it doesn't stand there either. It runs, it leaps, it uses its speed and grace. Your version of that is boundaries, clear, immediate, non-negotiable boundaries. Not explained, not justified, just enacted. This doesn't feel right, I'm leaving. That's deer power. That's sensitive strength. Your challenge isn't to become less sensitive. It's to honor your sensitivity by acting on it. To stop apologizing for feeling things deeply. To recognize that your gentleness isn't weakness unless you refuse to defend it. That your grace isn't fragility unless you let people treat it as such. What would happen if you stopped trying to be the lion and fully became the deer? What would happen if you trusted that your way of moving through the world, sensitive and aware and responsive, is valid? What would happen if you defended your gentleness as fiercely as others defend their aggression? The deer teaches you this. Sensitivity is a superpower only if you trust it. Gentleness is strength only if you protect it. Presence is power only if you refuse to numb it. You are not too sensitive. The world is too numb. And your power is in refusing to join that numbness. You chose the deer because you're tired of pretending to be tough. Because you know deep down that your sensitivity is your gift, not your curse. And because you're finally ready to stop apologizing for the way you're built. Your power is gentle. And in a world of violence, that's revolutionary. 5 animals, 5 forms of power. 5 instinctive forces you've been taught to suppress. The lion teaches sovereignty. That your natural authority doesn't need permission. That leading without apology is your birthright. The wolf teaches strategic loyalty. That protecting the few who matter is more powerful than pretending everyone matters equally. The owl teaches sacred perception. That seeing clearly is power, but only if you balance wisdom with participation. The serpent teaches transformation. That shedding old selves is necessary, but constant change without integration is just escape. The deer teaches sensitive strength. That gentleness is power when you trust it enough to defend it. These aren't just personality types, they're archetypal forces, ancient patterns that live in your DNA. Jung called them the collective unconscious. Nietzsche called it the will to power. But whatever you name it, it's real. And it's been suppressed in you for too long. Your animal isn't a prediction of who you'll become. It's a revelation of who you already are beneath all the conditioning, beneath the social training, beneath the persona you've built to be acceptable. The question now is what you'll do with this knowledge. Will you continue suppressing your instinctive power, or will you finally unleash it? Not recklessly, not without wisdom, but consciously, intentionally, unapologetically, because Jung was right. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And Nietzsche was right too. Your instinct already knows what your intellect keeps denying. The animal you chose is calling you home. Home to your true nature. Home to the power you were born with. Home to the instinctive force that, once unleashed, will transform everything. Thank you for taking this journey into your instinctive self. Share which animal chose you in the comments. Your power might inspire someone else to claim theirs. Until next time, remember, your instinct chooses the animal. Your soul explains why. And your power lies in finally listening to both.